If you are an international student or a postgraduate work permit holder in Canada and you do not have enough express entry points, or your permit is about to expire before you can get picked by the express entry pool, check out this program to see if it may help you to convert to permanent residency. And stick with me to the end to also find out how much money you need to budget for if you're going to pursue this program. Now we know that the math is not mathing and there's far too many international students in Canada than there are spaces for people to convert to permanent residency each year. You guys need to be proactive to figure out what are the options that are available to you, which path must I pursue, and which one has the path of least resistance and probably least stress. I don't know. Let's talk about the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, aka the Ontario PNP. I don't know why they need to change the names. Ontario Provincial Nominee Program. Ontario. We are going to be targeting specifically the Ontario PNP International Student Stream. An international student is somebody who came to Canada to study in Canada and now is either a study permit holder or a postgraduate work permit holder if they have finished their studies. Now, the stream allows international students with a job offer in Ontario to apply for nomination. Now, the job offer must be in tier category 0, 1, 2, or 3. So we know that it's management level to middle to high skilled jobs. The job position must be full-time and permanent, and the pay that you are getting must meet or exceed the low wage range for that occupation. And we're going to check that out in the video. Okay. Now, the position must also be urgently needed to maintain and grow ongoing business activities. And this sort of, to me, screams mini LMIA, but not in the true sense of an LMIA where the company actually has to go through the process of an LMIA. But if they can justify that you are a drafts person and they need 500 draft people to carry on their everyday business and they can prove that, then that might be sufficient. But as we go along, we're going to find out, is this actually necessary or this is on an as needed basis? Now, how Ontario chooses a candidate to invite is that it is basically like a mini express entry. It's a point-based system that is local to the province. And so you are in a pool with people who are in the same pool relative to the expression of interest for that province. And then you are only in the pool that is relevant to your stream. So international students who are interested in converting to permanent residency through the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program will be in the same pool and in a pool by itself. And the point ranking system is much lower than the usual express entry. So it's about, I think the maximum you can probably get is close to 100 or so. Definitely not up in the sky like 500 and something like express entry. Okay. So here is how they score people. So here are the scoring factors for points, right? It's kind of like a mini express entry, but it's just a provincial express entry, basically. And so you get like maximum points for being in a tier 0 or 1. You also may get maximum points for earning $40 or more. And then the occupation category, if you have a valid work permit, then of course you get maximum points versus nothing. So like somebody from outside of the country, for example. Oh, not even, because if you are in Canada and your status has expired, so if you don't have a valid work permit or a study permit, because your status expired, you're going to get 0 points here. Okay. How long you've been working for, salary over the last little while, and then the different tiers of education. And then if your field of study is something kind of in demand, so STEM, you get 12 points, business administration, you get 6, and then anything else, 0 points. For arts and humanities, business humanities, arts, social science, and education programs, 0 points. Interesting. Because it's not in demand, right? Or Canadian education experience, so you get more than 1 Canadian credential or 1 Canadian credential. So here are the points. And of course, we know that maximum points for English. If you know both languages, you get more points. And then the location of the job. So if you're in Northern Ontario, maximum points. Inside the GTA, but not Toronto, 3 points. So if you're in Northern Ontario, which is less populated, you're going to get more points than somebody who is in Toronto. Because Toronto has a lot of people. There's enough people in Toronto. And then now, if you went to school where you studied is in Northern Ontario, 10 points. In Toronto, 0 points. And these are where Northern Ontario, the boundaries of Northern Ontario. Hint, hint, guys. They're not trying to put any more people in Toronto. So you're not going to get no favor for you inside of Toronto. So this is a good idea if you're actually targeting this program. You're in school right now. You're thinking, okay, where do I go find a job? If your job is in any one of these places, you're better off than being in Toronto. So go to Thunder Bay. Just kidding. This is for information, okay? Don't get up and move without a proper plan. So now we know how you get points, and just a refresher for the tier categories that are eligible for this program is tier 0 to 3, and the types of occupations that are usually in these tiers are the managers, your management levels, your professional services, and your professional occupations like your engineers, architects, and such. Then you have technicians, technologists, and then down here you have more technicians, technologists, assistants, bakers down in tier 3. And you can always go to the NOC website, NOC, National Occupation Classification, to check to see what your NOC code is and what the NOC code is of the job offer that you are receiving. That's important because if you're in tier 4 or 5, you're not eligible for this program. Now, here's how we check the wages. This is going to be very, very important and more sensitive than even the express entry, because when the job offer that you're getting, you're going to need to be either paid above the low, at the low, and above. And we saw the score ranking system where the points that you are awarded is also relative to what you're being paid, right? So of course, the higher you're paid, the more points that you're getting. So you are going to need to make sure you go into here to make sure that you are being paid at least the low range or the low wage or more. And if, say, for instance, your job or your occupation is not on the list in a specific region, then you should just use the wage for all of Ontario versus the region within Ontario. We're going to see on this website where you have the province of Ontario, and then within the province, you have the different regions, Peel region, the Durham region, the other regions, I don't know, Halton region. So here we go. So to check your wages, you go to this job bank website. It's jobbank.gc.ca/trend-analysis/search-wages. And then you can search by city or postal code or job title. So let's say you are a drafting technologist. So like a drafts person, and you want to search. What's going to come up is how this position, the wages for this position in the different areas of Canada. And so what you have to do is to make sure that it matches in Ontario. All right, so drafting technologist areas across Canada. I mean, I'm sure you can filter to the province that you want. So you're just looking for Ontario, element O, and then the area in Ontario that you're working. So the Toronto region versus the Hamilton. And so in Toronto region, here's like, I think this is the median, low, and the high. So that's low, median, high. And the rules is that it must be higher than the low range. It must be meet or be higher than the low range. So if you're in the Toronto region, you must be paid this or higher for the job to qualify. Okay, and this is hourly wages. Now the criteria for this program, you have to think about the job offer, the employer, and you, the international student. So we have an idea of what is required for the job offer in terms of the tier and wage. Now the employer has to meet certain requirements as well in order to be eligible for that job position to be considered. Okay, so now the employer must have existed and have been active for at least the last 3 years. The place of business and the business activities need to be in Ontario. So it's not like an Ontario company that does operations in Vancouver, for example, and they just have a local Ontario office, no, or an Ontario office that does business in the US. Ontario business and activities within Ontario. The location of the employer in Ontario also has some special requirements, whether you are inside the GTA or outside of the GTA. So this is the Greater Toronto Area. So if you're inside the Greater Toronto Area, the employer needs to be making at least $1 million minimum annual revenue, gross annual revenue. If the employer is outside of the Greater Toronto Area, then their gross annual revenue can be at minimum $500,000. Super key, super relevant. And this says to you guys is that employers outside of the Greater Toronto Area are preferred because they have less requirements. And of course, probably it's less populated. So it's a bigger expectation to expect them to be making $1 million. I don't know. Now, more requirements for the employer. If they're inside the GTA, they need to have at least 5 full-time employees at that location that are Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Because at the end of the day, guys, they're going to prioritize hiring local talent first and then the immigrants, or then the non-local, or then the non-Canadian, or then the non-legal immigrant status person. Okay, so they need to have at least 5 Canadian citizens or permanent residents, and if they're outside of the EGTA, they need to have at least 3 full-time employees at that location who are permanent residents or Canadian citizens. Now, this is where now I'm talking about the mini LMIA. So now if the director, this is the director of the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. If the director of the program deems it necessary, they will request that the employer showed reasonable effort to retain local talent. So reasonable effort to hire somebody who is a Canadian citizen or a Canadian permanent resident, but they were unsuccessful. So, and that is technically what would be required if in the case of an LMIA. And so this is like a mini LMIA requirement where they showed that they advertised the jobs, people applied or nobody applied, or the people that did apply were not qualified, or they were qualified, they were hired and they didn't show up for work, whatever the case may be. If the director says we need to see this, then you need to see this. So it's not something that it seems to be a must-have, but this in combination with showing that there is an urgent need for the occupation means that there needs to be showing something of the sort that you are in fact needed here and now. And yeah, don't be intimidated by this. Let them be the one to dictate whether you need to show this or not. Don't be discouraged by this requirement. In order for the position from that employer to also be considered, the employer needs to complete a form. We're going to look at that form in a second, but the employer must complete the form and provide you with that form that you can attach to your application for a nomination. And the form is available at this website. So here's what the form looks like. Okay, note that there are buttons here. So even though you see that it's one page, it's not a one-pager. You gotta complete everything and then go next. Finish up, go next, finish up and go next. And this is the information that the employer needs to submit in order to have this job position approved. And this form needs to be completed by the employer, and this will be submitted as part of your application. So that was the employer. Now, you as an international student also have to meet certain requirements. So first of all, if you are in an occupation that requires you to be licensed to claim or be working in that occupation, then you need to have that license. So if you are in nursing, if you are in some sort of trades position or anything that requires licensing, you need to have that first. Now, it also is important where you studied in Canada. You don't have to have gone to an institution in Ontario. However, here are the requirements for the institutions. So within the last 2 years, so no more than 2 years, you need to have a letter of completion from either a 2-year undergraduate degree or diploma, or a 1-year graduate degree or diploma. Note that it's not specific to Ontario, so from any eligible Canadian institution, or a 1-year Ontario graduate certificate, Ontario College graduate certificate. So like, or my postgraduate work permit holders who did like a postgraduate program, like your project management postgraduates, this would qualify as an Ontario College graduate certificate, or a 1-year Ontario University graduate certificate from an eligible Canadian institution for full-time studies. And there is a list on the Ontario website of all the eligible Canadian institutions to be considered. So here's that list real quick. You can pause the video to if you want to scroll through, or you can go to the website, directly to the website, to see if your school is on the list, because that's going to be important to see if you're even eligible for this program. In addition to what I just said about the requirements for you as an international student and the employer and the job, go to this website here to just go through. It's the law. It's very black and white law looking screen that has all the requirements for the job, the employer, you, in the event that you need to be checking a little bit deeper for the requirement. All right. Now the process. What is the entire process? How do we take all the information that we know right now to this point, and how do we go ahead and apply? First of all of those things that we just looked at was to check your eligibility. Are you in the right NOC? Is the job in the right NOC? What is the program that you studied at school eligible? Is the institution that you studied eligible? And is the job offer eligible? Check the eligibility based on everything that we just did. Now, your language test is going to be required because you're going to need to prove your language competency, and the only way to do that is by the language test. So whether you do the English or the French test, if you do both, kudos to you because you'll get more points. We saw that. Get your highest non-Canadian education assessed by a body like World Education Services. This is called an Educational Credential Assessment. There is a video that will pop up in the screen here that you can go and watch after this video to have a straight, direct walkthrough of how to get an ECA. These things are going to become very relevant if you receive an invitation to apply, and also if you need to apply for permanent residency. Some of these things could take time depending on where you are. You need to book your test date, and maybe you don't know when the next test date is. For all you know, it could be in March. And you also need to apply for your education credential assessment, which processing times could vary depending on the institution that you went to in your home country and how quickly they can get the transcript to West. So all these things you need to factor in the processing time, especially if you are running low or running short on your validity. Right? If it's going to expire soon, you need to actually have these things already, or you need to get them done now. In any case, you need these for your express entry profile if you still want to be in the express entry pool. Also, if you are already in the express entry pool, you probably have these already. Yay. Then you need to register for an expression of interest on the Ontario website. So because this is a provincial program, you're not going to go through the usual express entry website. You're going to go through the Ontario provincial website, where they show you where the information is for the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. That's what you're going to be looking for. And there's a nice blue button that says register for an expression of interest that you're going to click. And we're going to do a walkthrough of what it looks like in behind the scenes after you click that button. You also need an attestation form. This word attestation now it's everywhere. Although this was always required. So this is not like a new requirement, it's attestation form, but you know, with the whole news now with the international students attestation letter. Anyways, attestation form. You need to complete the attestation form on the same day that you submit your expression of interest, and you need to have it ready for when you receive. We're going to hope for the best. For when you receive an invitation to apply, you need to have the attestation letter as part of your application for your nomination. Now, there are no fees that apply to submitting an interest, kind of like the express entry. Once you have your education credential assessment and your English language test results, you can apply. You're not applying, you are submitting an expression of interest, and you do that for free. The fees will apply now if you receive an invitation to apply, and when you need to go and apply for PR. So this is where I talked about you need to budget for these things, because these things are turned up. Okay. So this is a nice big blue button that is on the Ontario Provincial website that you're going to click, and you're going to register for a profile, and you're going to go into the system and register an expression of interest. So let us do that together so you get an understanding of what's behind the scenes of this button. All right, we're inside the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program portal, and we are a new applicant who wants to register. So you're going to choose your respective stream. So we are targeting the employer job offer international student stream. You have selected international student. If you'd like to continue under this stream, please select yes. If you've selected the wrong application, cancel. You will not be able to modify this stream after this step. Should you need to change stream, you'll be required to withdraw your application and submit a new one under the appropriate stream. It's like a point of no return. Yes. So the first step in the application process is to register for an expression of interest profile in order to be placed in the selection pool. You'll be required to do so for the following streams. Okay? Yes. Depending on the stream you wish to apply, you may be asked to answer questions related to your education, work experience, language ability, and job offer. Answers to these questions are scored and points will be awarded. You will be ranked against individuals in the pool once you have registered. Once you register, please do not contact the program. The program will contact you with details if they're interested in you. If you are invited to apply, you must submit your application within 14 days. You know what this means, guys, right? If you need to show your education and your language ability, what are the things that you need to show that? 1, your educational credential assessment from a body like World Education Services or any of the other ones. Check out that video. And for the language ability is your language test. Okay, you can't make up scores and then say that, you know what, if I get invited then I'll go and do the test. No, all of these things come before, just like your express entry profile. Okay, so if you apply within 14 days, the OINP will process your application and issue a nomination if you meet all the stream criteria specified. Okay, what to do if you're applied. If you're invited to submit an application for a nomination, you will be required to submit documents to prove that the points you claimed on your expression of interest are accurate. Depending on how you scored, you may be required to submit a Canada Revenue Agency documents showing earnings history and reference letters from Canadian employers to verify the work experience you claimed. Mandatory documents listed on this checklist over here. Let's check out this checklist. Okay, so we know that you need an attestation form, right? Your photograph, this is, even though it's digital, it's online, you still need a proper photo. Your passport, family member's passport if you're here with lock, stock, and barrel. Status documents like your work permit if you're on a postgraduate work permit, or study permit if that's the case, if you're currently under implied status. A letter from IRCC acknowledging that they received your application to extend your status. So like if you submit an application to bridge your open work permit or bridge your postgraduate work permit, then you are under implied status if it is expired. And how you know if you're under implied status, if you received a letter of acknowledgement that they've received your application. So just an acknowledgement of receipt. The fees that you paid for that application, and the post office mailing receipt if you did a paper-based application, which in my case I did for extending my bridge open work permit. Employer for this stream, you must include a completed employer form. You must scan and upload a copy of this, which includes the business and position information. Your job offer is this, so that's if you're a truck driver or whatever the case is. Important when we assess your application, we may need additional supporting documents for your employer to validate information on the employer form. Review the employer checklist to make sure that so them full of a checklist, boy, I may tell you. And then on the job offer, okay, so less than 6 months old, on a letterhead, must show your supervisor and their signature, stamped with the seal if applicable, and it must include the title, the knock. And this is something that you may have to educate your employer on if this is not something that is familiar to them. So you need to know your stuff. You need to know what what the knock title is for that position. You need to know the wage, the duties and responsibilities, because all of this must be on the employment letter. So it could be helpful if HR is willing to draft this for you with your guidance, sure, or if you draft it to show them an idea of what immigration is looking for, that may be a good idea as well, right? Number of days and weeks of vacation, location, start date, an indication of the offer being made as a full-time position, and confirmation on the terms and conditions of the job are effective on the date as of the nomination if you're already working for the employer. If you're currently working for your employer in the same position as your job offer, you can submit the original job offer with your application. If it is older than 6 months, even if it's older than 6 months, however, you still will also need to include a recent letter from your employer confirming ongoing employment, the conditions of the job, if anything has changed, and your original job offer must be signed by both you and the employer and include all mandatory information above. Okay? Current employment. If you're currently working an employer in the same position as your job offer, include copies of your most 2 recent pay slips. If the wage of your position does not meet the low wage but adheres to the wage required outlined by a collective agreement, include a copy of this applicable selection in your thing. And then if you have to have any license or authorization in Canada and Ontario to work. Education. Now, here is this now. One, so the education documents are the education documents that are related to your studies in Canada. Okay? So you must scan and upload a copy of your education, degree, diploma, or certificate, also known as your education credential, earned from an eligible college or university in Canada. And your official transcript must be issued by the college or university in Canada that granted your education credential, because you being a part of the international student stream is on the premise that you are an international student in Canada. And remember, you must have letters of completion or show that you've completed this program that we mentioned earlier. If you don't have your education credential yet, you must scan and upload a copy of your official letter from the college, which will be granting your degree, confirming that program requirements have been successfully completed, there's no outstanding fees to be paid, and the scheduled date on which your educational credential will be granted. So that means if you're finished and you haven't really gotten your transcript and the degree yet, you can get a letter from the school and your official transcript. If applicable, you must scan and upload other educational documents such as other degrees, diplomas. You must scan and upload a copy of your current resume with your application. The resume should outline your current and past work experience as well as the education, and include your current residential address, email address, and phone number. Resume must be a part of this. This is a checklist, okay, guys? This is your applicant checklist. Intention to reside in Ontario. So current and previous employment, job offers, education in Ontario, volunteer work in Ontario, and these are optional, right? But it does demonstrate your ties to Ontario. Include, but are not limited to, lease agreements, so like wherever you're living, professional network or affiliation. So if you're a member of the local chapter for the Project Management Institute, family ties, social connections, personal relationships, previous visits in Ontario. This could also be church community. It could be a number of things. Oh, if you do not have ties. So like for some people who are out of province, because remember that you are eligible for this program even if you didn't study in Ontario, right? Based on the criteria that we mentioned in terms of education. So if you don't have ties in Ontario, like say for instance, you live in Quebec and you don't have ties in Ontario, you can write an explanation letter basically that you intend to and wish to reside in Ontario. And I mean, you can tie it also to like social connections and personal relationships, like so friends and stuff like that. So please carefully check your financial documents and block out any credit card numbers so that they're not visible. Failure to redact your documents will result in a delay. Okay. So like bank statements and such, having an established bank account in Ontario could be helpful. This is intense, guys. This is intense. If you're invited to apply, You'll be required to scan and upload specific documents to support each scoring factor for which you received points. So a job offer with a description and duties and rate. So you must be able to prove this, right? Work permit status, work permit. Job tenure, if you claim points that you're currently working in your apply, you will be asked to provide a copy of your employer indicating that your start date and position details. Okay, we know this. Earnings history, so notice of assessment from CRA within the last 5 years. Guys, don't take filing your taxes for a joke. Do it. T4 slips alone will not be accepted. You must have earned at least 40,000 in a single calendar year as reflected on the single notice of assessment to receive points for this factor. Combined earnings over multiple calendar years will not be accepted. So this is only if you claimed points for this, right? So it's expression of interest scoring documents. So if you're invited to apply, scoring factors for which you received points. So this earning history thing may not be relevant because you may have just started working, and so there's no $40,000, nothing that you can show. Highest level of education. Okay, so degree, diploma, certificate, if obtained in Canada, or an education credential assessment. So remember up here when we spoke about the education documents, and if applicable, you must also include other educational documents and certificates or licenses needed to work in that occupation, in an occupation that requires licensing in Ontario, right? So let's go to this now. So, right, if you completed studies outside of Canada, you need to obtain an education credential assessment report that proves that your education is equivalent to Canadian. This assessment must be done by one of these following folks. So it's a good idea to have this before you go into this. Have these things before you go into any of this. In any case, if you're showing interest in this, you are probably also creating an express entry profile, which you need the education credential assessment and your language test to go into. Okay. So official transcript from your Canadian college. Yes. Canadian education experience. A copy of your post-secondary educational credential obtained from the college or university in Canada. Full-time study. Very, very, very critical. Official language ability and knowledge of official languages. So your language test obtained within the last 2 years, either from IELTS, CELPIP, TEF, or TEF Canada. So that's English or French test. Okay, that's your checklist, guys. Extensive checklist. And they give you everything that you need. Everything that you need. Sorry, so let's finish this now. Oops. It's going to ask you for all of this information, right? So you tell, yeah, we're living in Canada. You're a temporary resident in Canada. Passport number. Select the occupation of your job offer. What is the hourly rate of your job offer? So now this must be meet or exceed. So this is where you need to definitely go in and check for the wage requirements. So please select the duration of employment in the position of your job offer date. Only work conducted in Ontario in the same occupation for the same employer should be conducted. So let's say 0 to 2 years. Over 2 years. 1 to 2 years, currently working in a job offer. This is optional. Perfect, right? Because at this point, you haven't been working for a year to file taxes anyway. So this is optional, so ignore that. Do you have legal immigration status in Canada? Yes, because you're an international student. You have a post-graduation work permit start date. Highest level of education, this can be the foreign. Okay, so a bachelor's degree is higher than a certificate because this is a university certificate diploma program, but you didn't go to a university. Let's say the bachelor's degree. This is why you need your World Education Services. Select the field of study of Canadian credential that you intend to use to support your application. Okay, let's do public administration. Please provide detailed information about the Canadian credential you intend to use to support your application in this stream. Institution, and so they have a list of institutions on here. If your school is not on here, then obviously it's not going to work out for you. These are the list of accepted or whatever institutions, right? So went to Humber College, more than 5 education credential programs, at least 2 years in length. Here we go. IELTS. This is where you can make this up. Okay, because if you get nominated or if you get invitation to apply, if you get an invitation to apply for the nomination, you need to have your English test scores to prove them, okay? So you need to show that you got whatever the case may be in all of them. Test date. Next, select the location of your job offer from the list of census divisions where you will work. If you are working in more than one location, select the location where you will report to. So where the main office is, like where you have a little setup, a little computer, a little desk, wherever that is, that's your main location. Okay. So let's say that you were in, Hamilton. That's where your job is. If the credential that you will be using to support your application was granted by an institution in Ontario that you physically attended, please select the location that you physically attended from the list of census divisions. If you did not physically attend classes in the institution, select did not physically attend class in person. So I went to Humber College. I think Humber is in the Peel region. And usually our region is comprised of different cities. So I think the Peel region is Etobicoke, that's all I can think of. North York, or no, York region is North York. Humber might be in the York region. You guys just need to know where your school is, okay? Just Google it. If you are registering for an expression of interest as part of the Ontario Immigration Nomination Program, special project or pilot, please check the relevant box below. Okay. I understand that by clicking this box, I am required to meet the requirements of the relevant special project or pilot I'm invited to apply in the program. I understand that I do not meet the requirements. My application or nomination will be refused. Do you understand that? Okay. Okay, you have 81 points because of all of these things. So the knock and the TEER, that matters, okay? Just the amount of points you get for in a tier 0 obviously is 10. Business or finance, knock, not scored for the stream. Hourly wage, so median, so all of that matters. 6 months, I get 3 points for that, and I would probably get more points if I was working longer. Earnings history, I get 0 points for that, so you'd probably get more points if you were working for longer and can show that you were earning $40,000 or more. Work permit status in Canada, you get 10 points for that. Level of education, highest level of education is a bachelor's. Field of study, public administration, number of credentials. So you get all these tests, and then of course I get like the highest probably possible points for scoring high on the English test. Don't take this English test for joke, guys. Don't take it for joke. Okay. Knowledge of both official languages, so no. But you would get extra points if you know French. Right, Adrian? Okay, your job offer is here. Your study of location of study. And then my total overall points is 8. Okay, and then you go next. And this is where you are required to complete and say yes, 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 and submit your expression of interest. And here's where you go to check the previous round. So now that you know your score, you need to go and check to see how is that relative to the points that are being called right now. So if you just go to Ontario OINP invitations to apply, and you scroll to the bottom to see invitations to apply in 2023. So of course we're at the beginning of 2024, so there's no international student stream draws yet for 2024, which is also important to be aware of the fact that the draws come ever so often. So far they've done some draws, but only for the foreign worker stream. So you need to be conscious of the date and make sure that works with you. So for the past rounds of invitation, job offer international student stream, the ranges of scores 61 and above, 61 and above, 62 and above, 71 and above. So my score is obviously pretty good. I probably wouldn't have been called in January of last year, but that's fine. And they're doing a general draw. So even though it's under the international student stream, they are doing some targeted draws within that stream. So targeted draws for trades, targeted draws for tech and health, targeted draws for tech and health, targeted draw for tech and health, targeted draws for trades, and then general draw. And they only did one general draw. You need to know where you stand. You need to know where your occupation, which category your occupation is. And there's, if you go over to here, you get the list of targeted occupations for this program. So very important to be aware of. all of the skills trades. All of this is going to be important for you guys, right? So go to here. This is archived because this was last year, no longer current, and they're going to be a fresh one for this year. So don't pay attention to that necessarily, but awareness is good. Okay. You could also check to see, as an international student, if you also qualify for the foreign worker stream, to see if that could be helpful for you as well. But remember that when you submit your profile under one stream, that's the stream that you're in. And if you want a different stream, you have to submit a different application. Do your math and see which one works best for you. Now hit submit. Your application is in. What next? Now that your application is in, kind of like express entry, you're in a pool for 12 months. You're swimming around, you're active for 12 months. As time goes by, if you get older, it will automatically update your age because you're going to be registering your date of birth in there. Okay. Now, after you register, there's a few things that you need to understand. One, just because you've registered doesn't mean that you will receive an invitation to apply, kind of like express entry, right? It is point based. And so if you are not ranking up there in the points, obviously the likelihood of you being selected is low. So you need to be making sure that you have enough points. And when you, as you've seen, when you go through the expression of interest profile, you actually come out of the end knowing what your points are to see where you stand to begin with. Second thing is that if you do receive an invitation to apply, it doesn't guarantee you anything. It doesn't guarantee that you will receive a nomination certificate. Okay. Thirdly, if you get an invitation to apply, you need to be submitting that application within 14 days of the invitation. And note it says 14 calendar days, not business days. Not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 14 calendar days. So once you receive an invitation to apply, you need to have your things ready. So everything that you claimed on your profile, if you say that you did this on the English test, if you say you have this education and you have this transcript and you have this degree, all of these things need to be lined up and ready in a nice folder on your computer. All of these applications are online. So you need to have things on your computer in a folder named appropriately. This is your passport. This is your picture. This is your ECA. This is your language test result. Everything needs to be lined up nicely on your computer, ready to submit an application if you get an ITA within 14 days. Of course, you need to, if you need, have somebody double check. Get together with an immigration consultant if you need help to submit that. You want to do the best you can to create a very strong profile, strong application, so that you can receive an invitation, so that you can receive a certificate, a nomination certificate from the province, right? Then, if you get an invitation to apply, you're going to be submitting your application to be nominated. This is not an application for permanent residency. You are applying for the province to nominate you to stay there. And this is going to cost you $1,500. So once you receive an invitation to apply, you're going to be forking out $1,500 to apply to be nominated. This does not include your permanent residency fee. And we're going to get into those fees as we go along. Okay, so boom, write down, boom, need to save up $1,500 or put it aside. You should have it already saved up. Put it aside. Processing time, the dreadful wait. We know. All right, you submit an interest, and once you receive an invitation to apply and you submit your application within the 14 days, it could take about 90 to 120 days for the application to be reviewed and approved. Now, we know that processing times can vary depending on what's going on. Right now, things are kind of all over the place provincially because of these changes for the international students. So we don't know if that has caused a backlog. Just take into consideration everything that you need to know and everything that you need to do to make sure that your status either doesn't expire, or if your status is about to expire, you need to get yourself a visitor's record so that you can stay here and be here legally while this process is going on. Understand that if you fall out of status, you could lose points on your profile. Okay, because having a valid work permit or a study permit gives you more points than having no valid status as a temporary resident, like a worker or a student. A visitor's record does not give you points. Okay, so this is about 3 to 4 months processing time. If your application is successful, yeah, celebrate. Now, what you will receive via email is a nomination approval letter. You will receive a work permit support letter, which is good for anybody who has fallen out of status or anybody whose status is about to expire. You can now bridge your application with this work permit support letter. And you'll get a nomination certificate. And this nomination is usually valid for 6 months, although you can apply for an extension if you need more than 6 months for some extenuating circumstances, but just don't have any extenuating circumstances. Just get it done, okay? Just get it done. You've been waiting for so long. Why are you going to go have extenuating circumstances for? Just kidding. If it's necessary, then you can apply for an extension within means, get some help if you're going to do that. So within 6 months, you want to be applying for your work permit through IRCC, not the province, no, because now you're done with the province. The province has given you what you want. They've nominated you. Yes, come to Ontario. We want to have you in Ontario. Be in Ontario. Stay in Ontario, please. Apply for your work permit. Apply for your permanent residency application through IRCC, through the permanent residence online application portal account. So that's a whole thing separate from express entry. Now, if you get an invitation, if you get a nomination certificate, you can also update your express entry profile, and this will enable you to get the points, which will probably guarantee you guarantee that you will be invited to apply. But based on how express entry is going right now, we don't know when the next round of invitations is going to go out. So I would say go ahead, take your nomination and go straight to the permanent residence online application portal. Get your application together and submit your PR application. Go to your job and start working and wait for PR to be processed. More money. So your permanent residency fee total is about $1,365, and that includes your right of permanent residency fee. Now, this is for an individual, so if you have a spouse or partner, that's another $1,365, and if you have children, it's $230 per child. Then you have to do biometrics if that is applicable, and if you need to do more than 2 biometrics or per family, then that's the fee right there. Taking into account also the cost for your education credential assessment, the cost for your language test, the cost for your medical, which you will need to do as part of your permanent residency application, the cost for your police certificate and in your country and also in Canada. You need to be saving up some money, okay? We're going to do a sum. I'm going to put a line item of all the fees, of all the estimated fees, okay? If your application is not successful, unfortunately, which sometimes happens, you will be notified by email and you can request an internal review. Now, this internal review is to assess the application as it is. If there's any errors, you get a chance to correct the errors, but you cannot add anything new. Like, say, for instance, you say, oh no, I forgot to include my ECA. No new information can be added to it, right? You can only correct what was there. No new information can be added. So just take that into consideration. If you are rejected and you need to go appeal it, you need to appeal the application as it is. Get some help. In summary, the Ontario Provincial Nominee Program is a helpful alternative for students who don't see a direct path to permanent residency, for students who don't think that they will have enough express entry points based on the way express entry is going right now. And if I could justify what's happening with express entry, is that the country, Canada, has identified all of the in-demand occupations that they need to fill, that they need, they have labor shortages in, and where they need people to go. And since they've identified that, they've created different categories within express entry to handpick and select those in-demand occupations and those people in those occupations. Usually, the points in those in-demand categories are lower than the overall express entry. So within healthcare, within trades, within STEM, within the French language proficiency, and transportation, there are lower points so that people can be picked to fill the country's needs. Now, when you have those people swimming around, everybody else is there, and everybody else is including people who are not necessarily in demand. So what's happening, I think, is that now that they have the general pool with everybody else, they're trying to pick the creme de la creme of that pool to stay in Canada, which is the high-skilled people, the people with the education that they would want, the type of experience that they would want to fill some of these high-skilled, not necessarily in demand, but high-skilled jobs, so that the creme de la creme stay in Canada. And the creme de la creme will usually probably have high points, okay? So if you see that you are on a path to not being creme de la creme because you're either don't have a lot of points, or you're not an in-demand field, or you're not an in-demand occupation, then you should consider the Ontario Nomination Program, which also is point-based, and so the creme de la creme will be chosen. However, it is a smaller subset of the entire express entry pool that is being considered. And of course, you can manipulate your points by doing things that will give you maximum points. We saw on the score, calculating the score ranking thing, that if you are in Northern Ontario, you're going to get maximum points than if you are in Toronto. Okay? Hint, hint. Okay? So give yourself the best chance by exploring the high point ranking areas in Ontario, maximizing your language score. Go and learn French so you can get points for French too. And it's a helpful thing to, it's helpful to be bilingual too for some occupations, and that will put you in the creme de la creme of the skilled people, bilingual people. And yeah, consider learning some French. The second thing I can say in summary is to get your ECA, get your language test out of the way. Your ECA is valid for 5 years. There's no need to wait, sit around and wait to get it. Get it done, invest the money, and get your language test done. Now, the language test, of course, is a little bit time sensitive because it's only valid for 2 years. But it doesn't mean that you should put it off until thy kingdom come, until you need it. No. Get it scheduled. Calculate, okay, if it's 2 years validity and my work permit is going to be issued in the next 2 weeks, I must figure out some way to convert to permanent residency within the next 2 years. Get your language test done. Okay, don't get it the moment you land in Canada. No, if you're an international student, wait until like you're through your program, closer to the end to get it. But don't sit around and wait for it once you've kind of gotten to that threshold of converting from a student to a worker. Don't waste time. Now, once you have all these things, of course, check your eligibility. Go to the legal page and go to the Ontario page to make sure that all your boxes are checked and all your ducks are in a row to make sure that this program is a good fit for you. Then register for the expression of interest. Hit the blue button, go through that profile, complete the information. Then we know that if you receive an invitation to apply, submit an application to receive a nomination. Once you receive that nomination certificate, apply for permanent residency if you're nominated. And overall, budget for this process. So we're looking at $1,500 for the application to be nominated. We're looking at $1,365 for the PR application. We're looking at about $300 for your ECA, about $300 for your language test, and plus or minus $250 for your medical. And depending on the country, I didn't want to put any fees for the police certificate because it depends on the country. It depends on how many you need, but you need to be budgeting for that. But right now it's looking at over $3,000 already for this process. So you need to be budgeting for this. Put the money aside, especially if you are a family that has more than one people. You're going to be getting an expression of interest and a nomination for one person, but then your PR application is going to be times 2. Right? So bare minimum for one person is over 3,000 Canadian dollars. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? Okay. Usually for express entry and for your PR application for proof of funds, generally speaking, if you are working, if you're currently working in Ontario or currently working in Canada, the proof of funds requirement is not a requirement. However, you still need to show some money of the sort, I believe. I think it's highly, highly, highly suggested that you show some proof of funds of the sort. So budget your $3,000 for this minimum. And Next steps is to, we know this, get your ECA, get your language test, check your eligibility for this program, book a coaching call with me if you want to explore, and or get together with an immigration consultant. If you have all your ducks in a row and you need somebody to look over your application for you, get an immigration consultant to do that for you and to hit submit on your application. You know always where to find links and suggestions for you to get information on this program, for you to book coaching calls, for you to do all these wonderful things. It's down below, as you know. I appreciate you and the time that you spend with me watching this. I hope this was helpful, and if it was, please hit the like button. If you think this is something that somebody else may need to watch, please share this video and consider sticking around and subscribing if you're not a subscriber for more helpful videos like this. I'm Christina, your 10-year Canadian immigrant who has been through all of the processes possible, not possible, and I'm here to help you along the way. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.